that struck me most in my experience is the human connection factor that you have in Italy. That you know, a lot of times for people our age, if you want to hang out, you watch movies, you watch TV, play a video game, whatever. But in Italy, it wasn't so much that. The people would go out and take walks. You would, you know, just walk through town, hang out in the piazza, go for a hike up to, you know, Fiesole outside of Florence, whatever. But it was always about a connection with someone else. You weren't there to be entertained. You came up with your own forms of entertainment. And there's always a distinct divide between like your family and then your work life. And so when you were at home with your family, you focused on being with your family and enjoying their company. And I just really appreciated that. And so I noticed that now that like when I go to do something with my friends, like, you want to go to a movie? Like, no, let's go out to dinner. You know, let's go do something where we can, you know, really enjoy one another's company and not have that need for entertainment or distraction, just one-on-one interaction with real people.
Good, thank you very much. Does anyone else have any questions for our fabulous panel of speakers?
I have a question for Erin. Sorry, I don't think we're going to here. That's fine. So, just a question that you raised, that I thought of when you were speaking, is you said in your speech, who wouldn't want to have these basic amenities that come through development, like cell phones and stuff like that, when at the same time everyone up on the panel has been talking about some of the downsides that come from development too, like more segmented and individualistic lifestyles, you know, becoming fragmented from your family because you spend, you know, on your time with your cell phone, or, you know, all the plastic that's used, you know, from becoming developed and industrialized that is now, you know, can't be broken down, as you mentioned. And so I was wondering if you've thought about that, and if, I know you said you were looking to answer the question in your presentation, what is development? But since coming back, do you think that you have begun to consider maybe some of the downsides to development, or maybe some of the darker sides to development?
Yeah, that was actually a really confusing aspect of the program for me, because kind of the point I tried to hone in on with that statement, who doesn't want to have these basic amenities that we're so used to, is the nostalgia that I felt when I went to the community about how they used to be these simple people, and how I thought it was so, I mean, I guess it's really hard to explain, but if you know the history of the Lacandone, they were these people, they were these primitive forest people that were so untouched from the outside world, and they lived such simple, pure lives, and there's always been this kind of aura about them of this, like, the most pure people in the world. And then you have this outside influence coming in, and immediately what I talked about was how I felt saddened at this, and I felt angry that the Western world had influenced these pure people and made them kind of change and impure with the outside exposure, and they weren't these forest-dwelling people anymore. They were entering the real world, and they were being developed, and outside influences coming in. But then, so I guess at first I felt sad that this had changed and that they weren't these people that we once admired so much. And then the confusing part was when I actually talked to them, I realized that they weren't necessarily sad about the changes. They were excited to be able to have the opportunities that we take for granted. And I do think that obviously that's a huge question, development. I mean, that's a big part of what the program was for me, was figuring out the good and the bad of development. And there's a ton of things that we saw, but I guess the point I was trying to get at with that particular statement was just that we don't really know how people in developing countries feel about development, and like outsiders coming in and saying this is what needs to happen is a really difficult thing to do. And like until you're in the situation and you're someone who's in a developing country, you can't be spoken for. And that's the point I was trying to hone in on, because I came in with these views of, okay, well, they used to be this, and it's so sad that they've changed to this. And then afterwards I thought, okay, well, I was wrong, I didn't know, and I will never really know how people feel in a developing country, because I'm not in a third world country that's being developed. So that was kind of the point I was trying to get at. I don't know if that really clarifies anything, because obviously I'm still really confused about it, and that's kind of why I brought it up.
I
have a question for Heather. We often hear about the cultural impact of going abroad, but your situation was a little bit different, and I was wondering if you could address the impact and the challenges of living on such close quarters with a bunch of other American students on a boat where you can't really run away when you're frustrated, or you have to work together as a team because you're dependent on each other.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that I didn't realize until I did sea semester that the nautical world has its own culture. And like most people like don't realize that either until I was there and I was like, wow, I'm just like being shoved into this. Like I have to wake up at 3 in the mornings because I need to do a boat check and like stand at the helm and like steer the boat, and it's like 2 in the morning and I don't care and I just want to sleep. So yeah, there was that cultural part that we had. Also, we did go to Christmas Island, which is part of the Republic of Kiribati, and that was really interesting because Kiribati is one of the poorest countries in the world, and so I got to see part of a lot of the panelists and a lot of the people who spoke about at the symposium, seeing the third world country side of things too. These people had nothing, and having a country that literally the only thing they have is the water around it because it's this desert island is just, it was a culture shock again. But yeah, so there were a lot of different culture things that I noticed just from being on a boat and having to work with people, even if you didn't necessarily want to at that exact moment. And just seeing how island culture has to deal with poverty in a different way. I don't know if that answers your question.
Anything else?
I want to hear about the book.
All right, so the book this book that I brought, that is the actual story. All of these books are handmade where it was from scratch. And so what I did is I took the story and wrote it out, and then I just printed it off and made a prototype for it. What I intend to do is turn it into something like the smaller book that anyone that wants to see things after the questioning session can come up and look at it and check it out. But it's called letterpress. And so what it is that each letter is a little piece of lead type that has that letter on it. And so each letter in a letterpress book is placed in a galley tray and set up and proofed and printed. And when Johannes Gutenberg in the 1400s created the letterpress to make newspapers and things, that's how everything was printed. And then once we started getting into typewriters and computers and things like that, it became more of a fine arts thing or a lost art. And so I'm going to take the book and create a series of maybe 50 copies or so of this in a letterpress format.
Yes?
I'd just like to commend all of you who talked about Halloween and Thanksgiving and all the holidays, because in our session, first thing yesterday, people were bringing up the theme of feeling kind of like an outsider or on the edge or not really, but boy, what courage to get on buses in Halloween costumes and then kind of like stand out even more than you might be feeling standing out, to begin with. Yeah.
I don't know that it was my costume so much. I've talked with some people in Italy, and I have a friend who's from Venezuela, and she says that, what I experienced is, even when I tried dressing like an Italian and trying to like exude this air of like European culture, they knew immediately when I walked in that I was American and asked me if I wanted them to speak English. And I was like, no, you have to speak to me in Italian or else I'm never going to learn this. But I found out from my friend that people from the United States just have this way about them that she couldn't explain to me. She's just like, it's how you carry yourself and how you express yourself. And it just marks you out as an American or a person from the United States. And so I think I just embraced the fact that I was never going to fit in and just use my experience to be myself.
Okay,